Hey guys, so today I'm going to walk you through how I sculpted this Goofy Goober Sundae from SpongeBob completely in Blender from scratch, and let's see if I make it look appetizing. Alright, so to start modeling the ice cream, I just put in some primitive spheres and I'm going to join them together with Command J and remesh them so they're actually connected together. And then I was a little bit confused about the difference between Dyn Topo and remesh, but basically it seems like Dyn Topo is good for adding in a lot of detail easily, and then after you're done, you remesh it so it's not so dense and it goes back from triangles to quads. I actually remeshed it too simply, I guess, because I lost all of that detail. But anyway, this is like my second time sculpting something like completely from scratch in Blender, so I am gonna have a little bit of back and forth. And then I was also being stubborn and wanted to stay on my couch, so I was using my laptop trackpad, which I thought was working, but once I switched to my very outdated Wacom tablet, I realized my mistake. So once I have a decent shape, I'm going to model the bowl, and I tend to jump around a lot when I'm doing 3D projects for fun, so the ice cream is definitely not done, but I'm just doing box modeling for the bowl, and I'm going to do that for the legs as well. Something I wish that Blender had was like a radial cloner. I know that they have an array, and I think you put a curve modifier on it to clone something around a circle, but I just did not want to figure that out. So for the legs, I'm just gonna model it and then duplicate it a few times with a mirror modifier. And as far as what I'm doing right now, I'm just adding more edge loops to get a little bit more control over the shape, and you just do that with Command R. I did figure out how to get my keystrokes to show up on the screen after I film this, so if I do any more Blender videos, you will see what buttons I'm pressing, which will be hopefully very helpful for you. So sorry I didn't figure that out sooner. So I'm gonna move my avatar over here so he's not in the way. And yeah, just more box modeling for the legs, and then I think we're gonna jump back into modeling the ice cream a little bit more because it looks like trash. So I think at this point I switched to my tablet, so I'm just adding in the areas where it's overflowing, and there are a bunch of different tools that you can go between in Blender, so I'm not saying this is the only way to do this part, but just the way I figured it out. And I'm using a noise texture that I made in the texture of the brush to get that bumpy texture. Here I'm making a mask, and then I'm going to extract it, so it's going to be separate geometry, and that worked decently well, but some of the edges were still like not reacting to my brushes, so I had to redo that a few times, and then I realized that the mask was still left on the very outer edges. But I think this is the only way I could figure out to separate like syrup that would match the existing texture of the head, the ice cream scoop. So here I think I'm gonna build up the syrup with the clay brush, and I wasn't really sure if this was moving the geometry up or actually adding stuff. I think this is a good reason to add Dyn Topo, is it helps you build up mesh. So then I'm going to smooth that out and use the snake hook, and that's just gonna pull out droplets, which is a lot easier to do than trying to model it in edit mode. So something to just be aware of is that like eventually it will stretch the topology out too much, so you'll have to rematch it and then go back to Dyn Topo, and yeah, it's just like you feel it out as you go. But this was really fun. These little details are my favorite part of sculpting food, and it was really fun to add like that extra edge thickness to the syrup. And especially the droplets, like the little head of the droplet is so cute. So like I said, I like to jump around a lot, so for the textures, I'm just doing a really simple principled BSDF and then adding a tiny bit of roughness so it looks like M&M shells. I think I left these a little bit too shiny, to be honest, but that's fine. And for the bowl, I wanted it to be like transparent glass, and eventually I'm going to show you a trick that has worked for me in the past in other renderers like Redshift and Octane, but it was not working for Blender, and I don't know if it's a Cycles problem or a Blender problem, but I'll talk about that when it comes up. So I'm just jumping around to try and get a feel for what everything's looking like, since this kind of model is going to rely on really good texturing and lighting to make it look realistic, since the model is pretty simple. So for the ice cream, I was debating how shiny should it be. I think in the end I do make it more matte, but a lot of the bumpiness and like realistic texture is going to come from this displacement. I was having issues also adding a noise, or not a noise, sorry, a bump map, where it was just not looking correct, and it was like messing up the colors, so maybe I hooked it up wrong. But anyway, I just defaulted to this vector displacement, and you can just see how much more detail that adds, and that's really going to carry this model. For the syrup, I'm just adding a color ramp to give it some more color variation so it's not all one flat color. And then on pretty much all of the food textures, I'm adding subsurface scattering, and that's just going to give it like an appetizing glow, for lack of a better term. And basically subsurface scattering, from my understanding, is how the light is like reacting or bouncing around inside the object, so it kind of gives it like a nice warm glow from the environment. Oh, and this is what I was talking about with using a vertex map to affect the roughness of the bowl. So basically the dark areas would be rougher and the light areas would be shinier, so it would look like the areas closer to the ice cream were like frosted from the cold. But no matter how blurry I made this, it had a really sharp line once it was rendered out. So I'm not sure if I was doing something wrong or if this is just an issue with Blender. But basically that vertex map is acting as a mask. So you just plug it in as an attribute and then use a color ramp to control how strong it is. But as you can see, there is a very strong line there that I don't like. So I messed with it for quite a while and I could not figure out how to make it a more gradual transition. It might be the fact that it's like a transparent material, but anyway. Moving on, we're going to model some bananas, and I think in the reference image the bananas were not peeled, which I thought was really gross, like imagining that in real life. So I'm going to be doing peeled bananas, which was very difficult, and it was not fun. So basically gonna box model them and then try to do it. I tried to do the texture procedurally, but it really did not end up working out, so I ended up having to sculpt it, which is fine, just not ideal as far as like speed goes. So once I got these placed in there, I did try like a noise, which again was not working properly, and then I tried a displacement modifier with noise in it, and that worked, but it was just getting too concentrated at the tip of the bananas. So that's why I opted to sculpt it similarly to how I did the ice cream. And if you look at bananas, which I'll pop in a photo in a second, like the lines on them are quite straight as far as following the shape. So I would have had to spend a ton of time to make these look super realistic, but I just did it until it was good enough, since this was just for fun. So yay for sculpting fruit. This looks kind of disgusting, to be honest. So once I got the first banana looking decent, I went ahead and copied what I did on the other one, so they did not look completely uniform to the first one. And just like to call this out, I redid this like 5 times, but I edited it out, so videos are not as seamless as you think. I've been doing 3D work for years now, and I still have to go by trial and error sometimes. So I decided to remodel the mouth because I saw a reference photo from someone making a real life with actual food Goofy Goober Sundae, and they used cherry syrup or strawberry syrup for the mouth, and I really liked how that looked compared to the reference photo where it was a very simple like red candy, almost like a Twizzler, and I did not want to model that, so I really like this goopy smile. And at this point I was feeling pretty comfortable with the sculpting tools, so this was really fun. I liked making it look all blobby and uneven. And as far as the texture, it's just got some transmission and subsurface scattering to make it look yummy. And it's so cute. Yay. And honestly, at this point, I wanted to stop and just forget the bananas and everything, but we had to commit, so. Alright, so now we're gonna do the cherries, which were pretty easy, and a new technique that I used was, well, not new to me, but just haven't done it yet in this video, is proportional editing, which is when you press O to turn it on, and it's that, like, blue bullseye at the top. And it basically just means anything within that circle that shows up is getting affected by whatever movement you do. So for something simple like that, I didn't feel the need to use the sculpt tool, so. And then for the stems, I just made another cube that I extruded out and then used the grab tool in the sculpting panel to turn it a little bit. I think you could have also do this with a curve and then maybe using the skin modifier, or I know you can wrap geometry around that, so again, I'm not really a fan of that workflow in Blender, so in Cinema I would have made a spline and then used a sweep and a circle spline and it would have been super fast. So some of the drawbacks with Blender, but that's okay for something simple like this. And then I got lazy and just duplicated this cherry across all three and just rotated it a little bit so they look different. I wish I had taken the extra 10 seconds to use the grab tool on the other ones, but oh well, I wanted to be done. Alright, so my computer's not the best, so trying to see what the textures look like fully was taking forever. Definitely need a new computer. Anyway, it's looking pretty good, but the ice cream is way too smoothed out, like, and that's due to the lighting not picking up the edges very well as my texture just doesn't have enough detail, and I think actually the topology needed to be subdivided like one more time. I'm gonna move myself so I'm not covering this the entire time. And like I said, this model is really gonna rely on good lighting and texturing, so I'm just trying to make some strong lights with like less spread so that they pick up the edges and have more contrast between the shadows and highlights. I did end up kind of blowing out the right side a little bit too much, so something to think about for the future when I'm doing these reflective colored foods. As you can see on the bottom, I added a plane to bounce some of the light back up, and I use that pretty much in every project when I don't necessarily want a ton of light hitting an area, but I do want it to stand out from the background. So that is also something that is used practically in actual sets. And here it's looking pretty good. I'm happy with it, so now we're just gonna get into final touches, which I don't know if I show myself doing it, but I do add like more geometry around where the bananas are going into the sundae so they're not like, cut off and looking very fake. And then here I'm just going around and I noticed that some of the droplets and Candy Smile were not sitting flush on the ice cream, so they were casting shadows. So went in and fixed that, and then I also realized on the syrup that I had not remeshed it, and that's why it was looking so bumpy in the render, which I did not like. So I end up remeshing it so it's a little bit cleaner, and then I added subdivision service to smooth it out. And I think I just added a little bit more bulge to all of the little droplets as well. And final touches. Oh, let's appreciate the little vanilla beans I put in there. You can't really see it right now, but I added little speckles. And maybe that's my favorite part. He's so cute though, oh my gosh. And basically my only goal with this was to make it look appetizing and like real food, but also stylized. It'd be very hard for someone to make it look this perfect in real life, as far as the shape of the ice cream, but then the textures look realistic to me. So I just really like that as a style for food renders. And I didn't show it, but I also used the sculpt tool on the little candy eyes and nose just to make them look less perfect. Alright, so here is the final product. Look at my little speckles. Unfortunately, I think I should have toned down the denoiser. I think I lost a lot of texture on this, so it makes it look a little bit too smoothed out. But overall, when we're zoomed out, I think it looks great. Yay! It's so cute. Please let me know if this was helpful in the comments, and like and subscribe if you'd like to see more Blender and illustration walkthroughs, commentary, all that good stuff. And I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!